Brian,
Yeah.
come on in.
All right.
You, Brian Jones, are dead.
Cool.
But don't worry, you are in the good place. You made it, buddy. It's okay. Here we have unlimited food, including refills on potato olays. Sweatpants are always the chic fashion, and all media has been digitally altered to include Betty White at some point.
Huh. I have a lot of questions, but mainly what?
It's the good place. You are dead. You'll have to come to terms with that. But
Huh.
the best part of the good place is that there is one podcast, and that's it. Only one. And that is the best podcast that has ever existed.
Office lady?
Movies on a Monday.
Oh, okay. That's what I meant.
Oh, wait a second. No, it's TV, guys. Hey everyone, welcome to TV Guys, the best episode or the best show that has ever existed in the history of ever. So good, it's sponsored by The Good Place. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Charlie.
And we have got a special guest. This episode has 20% more teen angst in it. And that's only just a little bit more than what Brian usually brings. But Brian's son, Charlie, is here with us. And he loves The Good Place, right, Charlie?
Of course.
Of course. Charlie, let us get to know you a little bit. Tell us, what are some shows, so we know that you like The Good Place, but what are some TV shows so we can kind of get a feel for what you like? What are good shows that you like to watch?
One of my favorite ones is The Flash. I like that one.
Okay.
Watch this TV show called The Big Mouth.
The Big Mouth. I haven't heard
Not
of that.
that
I've heard The
big.
Flash, of course.
Yeah.
What's the Big Mouth?
It's kind of about like teenagers growing up and like hitting puberty. It's kind of weird, but
It's one of those adult animated shows.
Oh, okay. Actually, I might, now that you say that, I might have seen an ad for it at some point. But yes. Okay. Sounds good. Any other shows that are like, you have to watch this? If you haven't watched this, watch it.
I don't think so.
That is a great show. I don't think so.
That is a great show.
But I will say, The Good Place for me is one of the best recommended shows I've ever recommended to people. You know, last time you say like, oh, you should watch this show, and then they normally don't. But there's been a few people, Charlie included, where I say you should watch The Good Place, and then they do, and then like, this is a really good show.
Yeah. And so because of that, we are going to talk about spoilers of The Good Place. Good Place, now, it's a show that is a comedy, and the whole idea is that the main character finds out she's in the good place when she died, and yet as things happen, she realizes they made some sort of clerical error, and it's not her that should be in the good place because she was kind of a crappy person on Earth. She connects with this other guy who taught moral philosophy on Earth, and he's trying to help her be able to blend in well in the good place so that it doesn't destroy everything. Because if you're like, how can there be conflict in heaven? Well, that's where the conflict comes in. And it's just really well written, and it has 4 seasons. So real quick, if for some reason you clicked on this episode, I really doubt that there's anyone who did this, but if you clicked on this episode, you're like, I've never watched this show, but I'm going to go ahead and listen to this episode of TV Guys. Do yourself a big favor. Don't listen any further yet. Go back. It's on Netflix. I think it's on Hulu. Go watch The Good Place. It's 4 seasons, and each are like 8 or 9 episodes of half-hour television. And so it's pretty easy to get through. Then come back here because the writing is really good, and there's some unexpected stuff as things unfold that you don't want to get ruined for you.
Yeah.
That's your warning. That's it. Now, if you haven't moved away, well, you're doing this to yourself. But real quick, so let's talk about Good Place. What is, both you guys, what is something about the show that was like, I realized that I love this show? What was like one of those moments where like, boom, yes, I'm invested, I'm in?
That's a tough one.
I think for me, one of the moment that really hooked me, because sometimes you're watching a show, you're like, I'll give it a few episodes, I'm not sure, was when they reveal that Jason was also like a mistake, and like, that he's not John Yu the monk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big plot twist.
Because at the beginning, I don't know if he actually was just Johnny the Silent Monk. That would have gotten old, and he would have not have been an interesting character. And then Jason ended up being one of like the funniest characters, and one of the characters with the most heart. Like he has a lot going on, and that hooked me in because more than at that point. I mean, there's more stuff that's going on, but that was when I decided I'm all in on this show.
Yeah. What about Charlie? Anything you can think of?
I mean, I like how they like started off their TV show. How like they started off like you're here, you died. This is how you died, and there's just kind of like a preview from there. It's showing your past life.
Yeah. Yeah, the hook for me, the premise was a good hook for me. As soon as we get that premise, I'm like, you know what? I like this idea. And the relationship of Chidi and Eleanor, especially that early antagonistic relationship, like their relationship definitely evolves, and it should. But that early one, immediately I'm like, these are two good characters. The back and forth between them, it's going to take a little bit for this to get old. I think that this really works, these two dynamic, because you have a character in Chidi who he is very, very smart and not like there's a certain type of being smart where it's just like, oh my gosh, you're so annoying, like a Ted Mosby. But there's another type of smart where it's like you admire their wisdom because they're not like flaunting it. They're not a jerk about it. This is who they are. And he is so passionate about the stuff that he knows and the knowledge he has. I really appreciated Chidi's character, and he continued to be one of my favorite characters. So how about you guys? What's one of your favorite characters?
Positive on that decision?
I am. I do like there's a lot of good characters. I love a lot of them. I can't think of a character. Tahani is like the least of the main. She's my least favorite, but I don't ever view her as bad. Her little shtick about like the name dropping gets a little old, but not to the point where I dislike it.
At least you can make a decision on like Chidi.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm very glad I am not a Chidi, or at least not in that regard.
Have consistent stomach aches even in the afterlife.
I am in paradise and I have a stomach ache.
How about you, Charlie?
I think Eleanor would probably be my favorite because she has that like sweet side to her, but like also like you mess with me, like I'll throw you on the ground, and, like I'll tear you down.
Yeah.
And for me, it's Michael.
I thought you'd say Jason, actually, although Michael is a great choice.
I think I've talked the most about Jason on the Good Place in past episodes. Whenever it kind of came up, but Michael is so interesting because he does a complete 180. Like he starts the show completely. I mean, here's where spoilers come in: that they weren't actually ever in the good place; they were in the bad place. But he starts attempting to torture them, and that's what he wants to do. And then throughout his failure, he actually begins to like them, and then he's on their side. And then he becomes like one of the most like, kind-hearted people, even though he's literally like they say he's a fire squid demon, whatever. But he's like a good guy, and you root for him.
Yeah,
he is. He's a character that the way he's written, even in the first episode, or actually probably more, especially in the first season, other seasons, he's a character that could be placid if it was in the hands of another actor. But this is Ted Danson at his absolute best. I think that it's probably. I don't feel any sort of real hesitation of saying this is Ted Danson's best role that I've ever seen him in. He just really makes Michael pop, and he deserves all the Emmys or Golden Globe nominations that he had received through his tenure. I don't know if he ever won any of them, but I know he was nominated a couple times. He definitely, between him and Eleanor, it's so hard to say. Like I was going to say, they hold the show together. But I mean, each character, if you take away one character, you really lose. I think Tahani's one, again, negative, that you could take away her and the show doesn't suffer too much.
Yeah.
I think all four of the other ones you absolutely need.
Or 5 with Janet.
5 oh yeah, Janet too. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, all 5 of them. Without them, the show is radically different. Without Tahani, it's a little different.
Yeah, with Michael, it's like, at the beginning, because, like, they're not supposed to be in the good place, but you just don't see that turn right away where he's actually, like, a demon.
Mm-hmm. And part of that scene behind the scenes, like, if you watch season 1, you never see Michael alone because the audience doesn't. We don't know that they're in the bad place until the finale when Eleanor realizes it. So if you ever saw Michael alone, he'd be like plotting and laughing and like, "Ha, my plans are going so good." So whenever we see him, we only see him with people, so he's in his like Michael mode.
Yes. And the first season has a little bit of this Lost-esque type. They do this throughout the show too, but really the first season, every episode is a centric on one character where they give you flashbacks of that character. And we don't a Michael-centric flashback episode until the season finale where they're going to reveal, because for obvious reasons, they don't want you to know what's actually going on with him.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know about anyone else. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who saw it coming, but I didn't see it coming. And I was surprised when I got to that end part.
Yeah, me too.
I think I saw it coming, but I saw it late, and I feel like someone else said something at some point, and it was just buried in the back of my mind. So I think I can't remember that moment, but I think even in that moment, I was like, oh, that's super cool. But I think I remembered, I was like, oh, that did sound familiar or something like that. But it's still like, even though that was like the big twist, the show continued to do that. There was a lot of things that it did where it toyed with your idea of what was going to be happening or what should have happening.
Yeah.
Let's navigate into relationships, because there's some really good relationships in this, like platonically between Eleanor and Michael, romantically between Eleanor and Chidi, or Jason and Janet, stuff like that. What to you guys, when you're looking at this show, what's one of the relationships that you're like, I love seeing this? Let me guess. Derek and Mindy St. Clair.
Oh, for sure. I didn't bring the white snow. I'm sorry.
Actually, I was actually going to say an underrated relationship in the show is actually Eleanor and Mindy St. Clair, because Mindy, I think, is a lot like Eleanor was on Earth, where she's just jaded and like no morals and whatever. All she wants is to be left alone with cocaine. And
as do we all, you know.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Big Cocaine.
We finally got a sponsorship.
Don't sue us.
But like Eleanor, through her relationships with everyone, especially specifically Chidi, she starts to like find her like her humanity and caring, and especially towards the end of the show, when they have this new system where everyone can go through their tests to get in the good place. One of the things that Eleanor wants to do is she wants to get Mindy to take the tests and, you know, try to actually get to the good place instead of just settling for the medium place. And I don't know, I saw that as Eleanor understanding Mindy in a way that other people couldn't, because they were so much alike.
Yeah, that was a great close to the character, and I'm very glad they did go back and do that. I think that was an important inclusion. Mm-hmm. What about you, Charlie? What's one of the relationships that you're like, I love this. I was shipping it.
That's a tough one, because there's like 3 of them, but I think my best would be between Eleanor and Michael, because it's like they know each other. They just like click. They're like opposite people as the opposite genders. Like the same people as opposite genders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eleanor kind of ends up being able to be for Michael kind of what Chidi was for her. Yeah. Which is really awesome to see. And that's why I love the Chidi-Eleanor relationship, because you can see how Eleanor at first wants to change for staying in the good place. Yeah. And then it becomes a little bit of she wants to change for Chidi. And then it becomes more she wants to change for herself. And then she wants to keep changing for the people around her, like Michael. And I just think that's such a natural progression of self-betterment, is because you get the right person in your life that just really ignites something inside of you. You're like, yeah, I want to even be better. You know, whether it's a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or best friend, or a puppy, I don't know, you know, whatever it is that you're like, this person, I want to be the best version of myself, because that person deserves for me to be the best version of myself in this relationship. And that was so interesting to me. And because of that, I was so invested in them. And that's why when they would do like the will they, won't they, I think this is like the best example of how to do a will they, won't they relationship, because they were torn apart by plot related devices, not from any sort of childish, not from some sort of insecurity, not from some misunderstanding, anything like that. It was really the plot forcing them apart. It was the star-crossed lovers sort of thing. And I was like, you can't keep doing this. You can't erase Chidi's mind for a whole season just when they're finally clicking. That's not fair.
Like the part about it that they always found each other every time they got rebooted.
Yeah, and that's such a great, that's a great point.
If they were like a couple or just like best friends, they would always help each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, what's something about Good Place that you're like, I've been itching to talk about this. Why didn't you ask this question so far? What's something you want to bring up?
One thing I think is The Good Place did in a way that I think Prison Break failed, which is that every season the status quo kind of changes. Like the first season, they're trying to figure out how to stay in the good place, and now they're in the bad place. They find out, but then it's like sometimes it's like, well, now what? And they keep changing that. Like now they're on Earth, now they're back in the afterlife, but they're planning a new neighborhood with new things. It's like a lot of times when a show does that, when you keep changing the status quo, it's never as good. I brought up Prison Break. It's like, yeah, they spent the first season getting out of prison, and then the next season they're on the run. And it just never really captured that same magic as it's the first season when they were trying to get out of prison. That was like, the show's called Prison Break, not On the Run.
And season 3, they're back in prison, but this time it's in Mexico.
Yeah, that was the worst one. We could have a whole episode about bashing Prison Break, but for The Good Place, getting back to that, the good version of it is they can have all these different versions of the story, different settings, but because they have these characters and their ultimate goal is actually, there's an underlying ultimate goal, which is to get to the real good place. And so through all of these different settings, that kind of ties it together and allows you to go on the journey, even though it's like, okay, now this is completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And even some of the plots too, like because it has such good writing, I'm in for the plot. Like I didn't like the idea of, okay, well, they're going to go back to Earth and they're going to try to get like that whole season 3 thing. I didn't buy that bit, but the writing was good and it was entertaining enough that I'm like, I don't really care. I guess I'm not, you have this idea of how it could be, and they surprised you with writing it better than how you would have thought. So I don't feel like there's too many missteps in that regard. I think there is one big negative I have for this show. My biggest negative is not only as a Christian, but just as someone who I don't like when someone's like, this is right. This is the right thing. And it's something that's like objective. This show tries this really, really hard to like walk that line where it's like, we don't want to offend any single person who either believes or doesn't believe in any sort of religion. So we're like, one of the first things that Eleanor asks, like, who is right? And it's like, well, everyone's kind of right, and then they may turn it into a joke about Doug Forsett. What I don't like is, some of the jokes that they make where it's like, well, this is actually true, because they're talking about such universal truths. And so they bring up things that are like, people from Florida, they're always going to hell, stuff like that. Obviously, they're meaning it in a jokeful way, but they kind of go over the line, in my opinion, too many times where it's just like, no, that's not, I get that you want to make the joke, but that's not actually a universal truth. Stop trying to push that this is true or that's true or what have you.
But they can
did you guys feel that at all when you watched it?
At times.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it works best when it's so outlandish that no one's ever going to take it seriously.
Yep. The gatekeeper. Frogs. There's 8.7 million species on the earth. He chooses frogs.
Charlie, was that a hard thing that you had to get over?
Yes. You could have picked a giraffe, a 20-foot neck horse, but you choose a frog.
He loves frogs, and wolves were right there.
I like that actor a lot. His name is Mike O'Malley. He was on Yes Dear, and he was on an episode of Parks and Rec, and he was on Glee. And even though I never watched Glee, he was on that show.
Oh yeah. I liked his character in Glee.
At the very end, he has all these frog toys, and then like Michael gives him a real frog, and he's like so excited, and you think, I know exactly what you're gonna name him. You think I'm gonna name him Michael after you, and no, he's like Mr. Jumpy Legs.
That's what it was, Mr. Jumpy Legs. Like, oh, okay. Man, Michael's reactions to stuff, like how excited he gets at like the mundane human things, like his big bowl of paper clips. I I love how childish he can be, but in like a endearing way. Because Jason is childish in all of the wrong ways, whereas Michael is childish in all the right ways, the child like wonder. And I love what, like, when they're on Earth, and then there's the little like back and forth when he meets some of the guys from the bad place, and they make fun of him, like, oh, Sherlock Holmes called and he wants his jacket back or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Michael can't come up with a joke. He's like, well, Sherlock Holmes also called me, and
Yeah.
he had wanted to tell you. And it's just like he's just like going so badly and burning. And then finally when they leave, Michael's like, oh, I had another good one. Oh, I should have said that, you know.
He's like so mature and like wise, but he's also immature at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great one, because his immaturity does actually make sense, because of the experiences he has as a demon. He never has experienced life as a human, so he does have these huge gaps in knowledge that create some really funny moments.
Yeah, it's weird to think how in The Good Place, all those like people, like at the first season, how there's all those like the neighbors. To think that those are all like demons inside of like human suits, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Some people in neighborhoods feel like that is true for their neighborhood too.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
when someone keeps stealing my Amazon packages. I'm sure it's one of my demon neighbors. All right. This show is also one that does a good job with some emotional moments too, especially the finale. Anytime when you have someone going into permadeath and they're characters that you really like what. I'm sure as they're approaching the end of season 4, like when they're in the writer's room, like, guys, how do we end this? And this was a part I didn't like, again, like the whole idea of permadeath and then, all that sort of stuff. But I get that they kind of wrote themselves into a corner. It's like, well, how do we end this? How do we have a good resolution? So story-wise, the ending works, but again, if you're watching this show for the theology, you're doing it wrong. So I was going to say theology-wise, it doesn't work. Not at all. But the ending was really sad. So were there some moments either in the finale or throughout the show that you're like, this was the emotional moment for me? This really got to me.
I would have to say like probably the ending where they actually like their whole goal was to get into the good place, and like they ended up changing the whole system because the system was flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like really emotional, and how they like are so happy, and then they changed it even one more step further for the good place, which is another spoiler. Michael actually becomes the leader of the good place. He's like in charge of it now.
Yep.
The actual good place, and how they have a choice to like go through a door that just like completely wipes you from existence when you're like ready to go. I like that part.
Mm-hmm. I like that because, again, I think it's better than the ending just being they walk through a bright door and they're in the good place now. Because, I mean, they already did that ending. It's called Lost. But
it wasn't a purgatory the whole time. It wasn't. Stop it.
Yes, I know, but as far as like the end, they went through the door, at the end. But I like, because I like the fact of like we get to see them achieve their goal. They're in the good place, the real good place, and then they realize like, okay, well then now what? Which is kind of the whole thing. Like if you have permanent paradise, then after a while, even that becomes mundane. So I like that they kind of answered that with the door that like like Charlie said, puts you into the universe.
By the way, permanent paradise will not be mundane, just for everyone out there. I just want everyone to know that. But I get why in our human line of thinking, with our human limits on imagination, we can be like, yeah, I can't imagine what I'd do for all of eternity.
Yeah. Well, I will say Mike sure is good at creating universes, but I think the real God is a little bit better.
Exactly. Just a little bit. He's God is slightly better than Mose. Mose right here, God just a little higher.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny and like kind of like a sad part where at the end, Michael actually tries to go through the door and like he can't because he's not a human. That's kind of a sad part.
Yeah, it is nice for him. He gets to be a human. I also like that they finally made Jason like this show does a really good job of bringing stuff back, constant callbacks, constant running jokes, things like that. And so one of the callbacks that they do in the finale is they actually allow Jason to be a monk in a way where he's waiting for Janet to come back. So he's waiting in silence, in nature, just thinking. That's very monk-like behavior. That's exactly what a monk would do. And so they allowed him to have that. But for me, the emotional heart of that, and the whole emotional heart of the whole show, it comes back to Chidi and Eleanor, and where Eleanor has her whole life, she's pushed people away. She's tried to be on her own, all that sort of stuff. And then finally she found someone that not only she likes, but that also accepts her for who she is. And that, as I said earlier, helps her to be that best version of herself. And no amount of time is too long for spending with Chidi. And so that whole dynamic in that final episode, and then just her asking because she couldn't handle it to see him go, to have him leave in the middle of the night, like that was endearing. That was sad.
Yeah, because it's kind of like knowing like you're gonna die tomorrow. It's like I don't want to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of those moments where it does hit you in the emotions. And going back to what you're saying about Jason, is one thing I like about Jason is a lot of times shows do this. They'll have the character who is intellectually the dumbest. Like Jason, he's the dumbest character. Maybe Derek, but Jason. And then but he's also a lot of times, even from the very beginning, like the most like emotional, and like he's got like the most heart. You see that. I mean, you see that in Friends with Joey. You see that in Boy Meets World with Eric. A lot of times they have that. It's a natural pairing of caring and emotional with being dumb.
Yeah. Guys, Jason figured it out. Oh, this is a real low, guys.
That's a real insult.
And I like the moments when Jason actually like makes sense, like where the final hours of their experiment in the fake bad place or the fake good place, whatever, and they're trying to get all the points they can for Brent. And then so Jason is like, in defense or in football, prevent defense is good for one thing, preventing you from winning. It's better to just try and do something than to just sit there and try and not to lose. And like they're like, that actually makes sense. And it's just like, I like that there are those times when he has the answer, and everyone like obviously there's a reason why you write him off, because usually when he gives you those nuggets of wisdom, he'll follow it up with a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Like, well, we don't do that part of it, but the other stuff you said was good.
I learned that from football.
Or he'll give you like a meaningful analogy, but he didn't try to. He was literally just talking about football or something, and then there's like, oh wait, that applies to life.
Yeah. Every time I have a problem, I throw a Molotov cocktail, and then boom, suddenly I have a new problem.
Jason, how'd you die? Oh, I got locked in a safe trying to rob a pizza place.
Yeah. A Swanson safe.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it's actually they actually had I forget where they aired it. I think it was a podcast. There was The Good Place, the podcast. It was hosted by Mark Evan Jackson, who played Sean the Demon. And they would have ads in there. And one of like their fake ads, it was they got Nick Offerman as Ron Swanson to do an ad for Swanson safes. And he's like, and just to be clear, our safes are for things, not for people. Don't get in our safes.
That's good. And Nick Offerman was also a cameo on this show. He pops up in the final episode, as does Michael Schur.
That's right. Where did he show up again? I know he's in there.
He was when they're kind of like panning past like the experiments, and like it shows on the TV screens different people like going over how they did with the architect, like Brent. It does show him, and he's just like, so I can't tell a woman she smiles. She should smile to look pretty. What if she would legitimately look prettier if she smiled? And then like right as it's panning past that, it also has Michael Schur without any sort of dialogue. You see him talking with architects.
I didn't know that. one thing I think I can't talk about the show without mentioning the episode that really shows the acting chops of Darcy Carden, who played Janet, is
the all Janets.
Yeah, they're all Janet. So they all get sucked into the void. Not Michael, but Eleanor Chidi, Jason Tahani, and Janet, and they're all Janet. So like she had to play all these different characters. And I was listening to her talk about it, the actress, and one thing she did to get into it was we had recordings of all the different characters talking, and she would drive around just listening to them, trying to get their speech patterns and their accents, and try to like get it like that. And she was listening to William Jackson Harper, who played Chidi, and as she's driving around, she drove past. She saw William walking down the street, and so she like creepily pulled up next to him, rolled down her window, and said, "Hey, I'm listening to you right now."
See, that actually sounds like a real thing Janet would say, but not in the creepy way.
Yeah,
I'm
listening to you right now, Chidi.
I love how Janet has like evolved. Like all the main characters, like because most of them are human, and so like Michael and Janet, they practically at the end become human because Janet is so evolved at the end that she like feels emotion.
Yep. Yeah, and she does a great, and she's not just in that episode played by those four. She also has a bad version of herself. She has a disco version of herself. She's at one point actually Vicky in disguise. At another point, there's just a couple different times when she is playing something else. Plus, you have just a natural progression of her going from very robotic, not a robot, all the way to being, like you said, Charlie, into a more human type character. And I love one of my top moments though for her, not a girl, is when she gets rebooted for the first time, and then she's in Michael's office with him, and he keeps asking for Eleanor's file, and she keeps bringing out these cactuses, and then they have this really long like, Michael, I've brought you Eleanor's file. Are you sure it's Eleanor's file this time? And it's not a cactus. It's not a cactus. Okay. And then she brings it out and it's a cactus.
Or also the first time she got rebooted, there's the big screen, and she's saying, there's a video of Janet with like, the biggest smile on her face. "Attention, I have been murdered."
Or her defense mechanism. "No, Chidi, please, have children."
I'm married.
She backs up. "See, this isn't even much, kids. This is kids from the Teen Choice Awards."
Goes again. Please. That's funny.
Man, this is a really good show. I was gonna say if you haven't seen it, but I mean, if you haven't seen it, we ruined it for you. You're welcome. You don't need to go see it.
I think the show also knows the right amounts to show people. Like we've mentioned Derek, who's like another Janet that Janet created, and I think he's the kind of character, if he was on it more, he would be a little bit too much. But I think we just get hints of Derek every now and then.
Yeah, he's kind of like another dumb character, but we already have one of those, so you don't need to.
Exactly.
He's this show's John Ralphio.
Yeah, he was partially annoying, but he had small enough doses that it was fine. He had some funny stuff like the whole drinking Scrabble letters in the cup or whatever.
You don't mention that he was a sex doll.
Oh,
that's true. Yes, he technically is.
He also at one point had a martini bowl with no martini, just
olive. Yeah, that was funny.
That's right. Also, we had another character that fit that bill too. Oh, why am I forgetting his name? Adam Scott.
Oh, yeah.
Trevor. Thank you. Yeah, Trevor. That was another character that his whole purpose is to be annoying because he's a douchebag sort of guy. He's a demon. He's from the bad place. His whole point and his existence is to be antagonistic and a jerk and annoying, all that sort of stuff. So they use him to have conflict when conflict is needed. But again, like you said, they don't overuse him. It doesn't get to the point where you're like, I am annoyed by this show right now.
And there's a nice little bit with them. So I think it's the beginning of season 3 or whatever, when the judge just like waves her hand and like sends him like sends Trevor like eternally flying through the void.
Yep.
And He's still there. You notice in the finale, they show like the interdimensional hallway with, we talked about the guy with the frogs, and as it's
Yep.
panning, real quick, you still see Trevor flying past again, still screaming.
I didn't see. I pointed out the Michael Schur thing, and you pointed out the Trevor thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like
Look
how
at that.
who was it? Which one? It was the one of the demons with the glasses. He was just so happy the whole time. It was almost like he wasn't one of the demons.
Oh yeah, I can't remember what his name. He's
the one that has the weird name, like Bomba John or whatever his name was.
no, he's the white like balding guy who's a little more stocky.
Oh, Glenn.
Yeah,
Glenn.
Yeah, he's just like so positive, but he's also like, let's kill him.
Yes, just like how all good mass murderers should be, nice and positive until they kill you.
They're your friends until they're not.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Well, that's all I've got for questions. Anything else about The Good Place that we didn't bring up that you're like, we need to talk about this?
Let's see, I'm trying to think. You got anything else, Charlie?
I don't think so.
No, I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Wraps it up. Well, there you go. Such a good show. It's great writing, great cameos and stunt casting. Just a lot of fun. They balance so much so well in this show. Brian, where do you have it? If you remember off the top of your head, where do you have it on your list of shows?
I will pull it up quick. It's definitely in the blue, which means it's in the top quarter.
I knew it would be. I thought maybe it might have been in your top 10. Maybe you cracked it.
No, it's not in my top 10, but it might be. We'll see when I rearrange again next year.
If he's not dead.
And then we have a thinly veiled death threat from your son. All right. Speaking of which, though, this is going to be a spoiler alert for Star Wars Episode 7, but it's like 7 years old, so you're fine. But when we were younger, Elijah saw that movie when he was like 4 or something like that. And he always loved to act like Kylo Ren. And he'd always want to reenact with me the scene where Kylo kills Han Solo, his father. It's like, I don't feel comfortable that you always want to go back to this scene.
And kill personally me.
Because go like where you like have you stay on the couch and fall off it or what?
No, he would. It doesn't even matter where I'd be. He'd just want to stab me, and I'm like, can you play with someone else, please?
You're scaring me.
Yeah, I'm gonna call a therapist real quick.
I just found out it comes in at number 41, which is way too low. It's definitely going to jump up when I do my new rankings.
That's just 42.
Nice. Is this? Let's talk about rankings for Michael Schur shows, or just really the 3 biggies of Parks, and even though it's not technically his, but The Office and this
and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which
okay, we'll do that. Those 4. Where does this fall? Number 3?
It's hard. I think Office and Parks are gonna have to be number 1 and 2 for me. I think Office, then Parks. I think Good Place, then Brooklyn Nine-Nine. However, I have just started a rewatch of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I have access to a Hulu account that is being paid for by someone within my family, so it could be me, could be someone who's not me. But either way, I can now start watching.
What a way to say that! the most the most suspicious way you could possibly give me that information. That's how you did it.
Yes.
Thank you. So these are watching. All right. Yep, I'm the same way. Office, then Parks, then I thought you liked Parks better, but I mean, those Parks and Office are those shows that is like depending on how you're feeling that day, one of them can edge into the top versus the other one.
Well, for my 2021 rankings, Parks and Rec is number 1, but I'm anticipating The Office taking it over again.
Of course. And as it should. Office is great, but Parks and Rec is great too. It's hard. All right. Well, that is all that we've got for this episode. No, we actually have some trivia. I forgot. Brian, what was last week's trivia?
So last week, amongst the different shows, we talked about Gilmore Girls, and I talked about how Melissa McCarthy was not the original Suki. Originally, Suki was going to be played by Alex Borstein, who you might know as the voice of Lois on Family Guy, or she was a regular on Mad TV. She played Miss Swan, was her big character in that show. I think it was Mad TV that she was on at the time, and they would not let her out of her contract, so she was not able to star as Suki. She was in Gilmore Girls for a few episodes in the very beginning as a recurring character who played the harp. And interestingly enough, her husband in real life at the time, Jackson Douglas was on Gilmore Girls as a recurring character as what would have been her character's husband. It would have been them playing a married couple on the show and in real life. But when Alex Borstein was not able to get out of the contract, she wasn't able to star in Gilmore Girls. That's when they recast and starred Melissa McCarthy.
There you go. So you just learned something. You got learned, y'all. Sorry, I won't do that again.
All right. Our trivia actually came from Charlie. And do you want to say it or do you want me to?
You say it.
All right. So we've mentioned the character of Derek on The Good Place, who's played by Jason Mantzoukas, who we've mentioned before also was a recurring character on both Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well. Jason Mantzoukas has also a starring role in a adult animated series. So what adult animated series stars Jason Mantzoukas, who was Derek on The Good Place?
There you go. I don't know. I can't. I can't think of it. Although I know that I've heard him and I've heard his voice as the main character. So as soon as you say it, I'll be like, oh yeah, I know that. I know that I know the answer. I just can't find it. So
The cool part in one of the episodes of this show is actually he's old now in this episode, and he actually is like an exact replica, but cartoon version of his actual, like, as a person.
oh yeah. Yep. Animation of Jasonation. Nope, that didn't work. Well, we're gonna go. You take a swing and you'll miss it. All right. Well, that is all that we've got for TV, guys. Next week we're gonna have kind of it's not gonna be a two-parter. We're gonna do 2 weeks talking about Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving episodes. So drum up your turkeys, and if you've already got your Christmas tree up, then just skip over it, I guess. I don't know. But until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Charlie.
And reminding you to take it sleazy.